What is it that makes a great flagship smartphone? You would think that in a multi-billion industry the answer would vary wildly, and for a good reason. It's a gigantic market after all, serving the needs of hundreds of millions of people every year. But the answer doesn't vary, at least not lately. But does that mean that we're getting phones that are barely any better than their predecessors stuffed down our throat? No, that's probably unfair. But it's been a while since we've had one of those few and far between but highly prized moments where our collective jaw drops and we just know. We know that this is something special, new and exciting. Something we really want to get behind on. With the G5, LG is undeniably shooting for just that. It wants to excite, it wants to entertain, it wants to change things up, and it wants to be unique. And there's a two-pronged approach to that. The G5 features a modular design, meaning you can exchange modules, or friends as LG calls them, to get added functionalities such as a camera grip for a more convenient photography experience or a high-fidelity DAC for improved audio. There are also toys that hook up to your device, like a remote-controlled robot ball or a handheld 360 camera. And there's the unique camera configuration on the back of the G5, with two sensors, one wide and the other even wider. So life's good when you play as LG says, and we doubt anyone would disagree. But in order to get to play with the G5 and its friends, you have to first doll out some serious cash to get one, and there are plenty other companies vying for your attention. After all, at the end of the day, buying a flagship smartphone entails at least some consideration on your part, and so playfulness is just the icing on top. This is Chris with PhoneArena, and it's time to see if the foundation underneath the G5 is solid enough to warrant the buy. For the last 3 years, LG has had a very clear design philosophy when it comes to its flagship line. It's what the company referred to as arc design, or just barely rounded rectangles with a slightly arching top and bottom, and particulars such as rear-mounted power and volume keys, along with removable backplates from the G3 onward. The G5 is unlike any of its G-series predecessors. It's more aggressively rounded at the sides, smaller, thinner, and while the volume keys have been repositioned to the left side, it's honestly quirkier than ever. The top of the phone, for example, is slightly flexed backwards, while a circular power key doubles up as a fingerprint scanner on the back, alike to the Nexus 5X. Seemingly more important in a world increasingly dominated by metal high-ends, however, LG finally joins the club and is ditching plastic in favor of cool aluminum. But it doesn't feel like metal because the aluminum in the body is covered by a significant layer of primer. Of course, by far the most peculiar part about the G5 is the modular bottom, which can be ejected with a press of a button on the lower left. The removal process itself is well thought out, though once the module is out, we're always afraid that we're about to snap the 2800 mAh battery in half when trying to detach it from the base due to the amount of force required. We were kind of hoping that this would be limited to the early production samples we got to try out, but the final unit is no different. Still, given how rarely you have to deal with this, it's probably not that big of a deal, just a bit disappointing given LG's insistence on buyers getting these. All said, does the G5 feel in the G-Force leather shoes? We would argue that it does, and subtle touches such as the fine chrome lining of the frame sure help with that. So we dig the vibe of the phone, though the matte back is naturally on the slippery side. Meanwhile, the aforementioned chrome edge also digs into the hand a little bit. In the end, we applaud the minimalist approach this time around, but we also can't pretend that we're head over heels in love with the G5 styling either. LG was the first to jump onto the Quad HD bandwagon, but thankfully it has seen no reason to chase even more resolution with the G5. The 1440x25 60-pixel resolution of Volt is what we're dealing with, though all that visual excess is now less evident than ever before, with the company going for a smaller 5.3-inch display. To protect the screen, LG is making use of what it calls a 3D art glass, which is really just the company's way to market a Corning Gorilla Glass 4. Like in the past, LG is banking on colors that just pop with the G5, meaning significant deviations from the globally accepted sRGB standard. On the bright side, and literally, the G5's display can get crazy bright in extreme environments, managing over 800 nits on the top end. Last but certainly not least, the IPS LCD display of the G5 has been cleverly engineered as to allow it to jump on what is starting to feel like the next bandwagon: always on display. These new features means that the phone will always display the time and date along with any incoming notifications. even one from third parties. Customization is limited to just adding a personal message, which is a bit unfortunate, as is the fact that content is rather hard to read, even from a moderate angle, especially when there's light from lamps or sun bouncing off of the display. With the LG G4 having recently moved to the latest Android 6 Marshmallow base, most would expect a similar looking UI with the G5, which runs on the same build. Thankfully, that's not the case, and we say thankfully because we've never been big fans of the styling with older LG devices. With the G5, however, we're starting to see some positive change, with fewer eye-catchy colors and a mostly black and white theme. Quite frankly, after so many years of cartoonish designs, we're finally happy to see a more dignified, mature approach to LG's UI. Styling is far from the only thing that's changed, however. For example, the app drawer is gone for good, meaning all your apps will be plastered over your home screen a la iOS, and a staple such as Dual Window, which allows you to run two apps side by side, has been retired with the G5, likely because of the smaller screen. The LG Health app has also been updated and has received a visual and functional overhaul. Perhaps more importantly, however, G5 users will be treated to 100 GB of free Google Drive storage for 2 years. Finally, this is the first G-series flagship to integrate a fingerprint scanner, and we're happy to say that it works very well. You don't have to wake the screen in order to authenticate and can hide sensitive photos and notes behind it. On the downside, we're growing more and more dismissive of scanners located at the back, as they're just not that comfortable when you consider how often your phone will be lying flat on the table. LG's track record with the type of silicon it ends up putting in its flagship isn't splendid by any means. With the G5, however, LG is ready to start clean and is making use of the top-shelf quad-core Snapdragon 820. Qualcomm says that the 64-bit custom Cryo cores in the new chip are twice as powerful as the ones found in the previous generation, and the Adreno 530 GPU brings some 40% improvements in graphics performance. Add 4GB of latest generation RAM and the package is seemingly complete, at least on paper. Thankfully, in our experience, these numbers add up to a meaningful improvement in user input speeds and general responsiveness. Quite frankly, while we won't go as far as to claim that the G4 was exactly sluggish, it did hiccup here and there and lost its pacing more often than a trained eye has a tolerance for. So we're pretty happy to see the G5 running lean and mean, with smooth and timely execution of essential operations. Finally, the G5 continues LG's legacy of always thinking about the power users in the crowd and offers expandable storage through microSD. On top of the 32GB of storage that comes standard, pretty much everyone buying into the new flagship should have room sufficient to breathe, whether trigger happy or just way into mobile gaming. If you've ever played around with the dual front-facing camera configuration of the LG V10, you'll know what to expect from the G5's equally offbeat dual setup at the back. But simply, the camera software of the phone lets you switch between the two sensors with a single tap, the idea being that you would use the two cameras for different compositions. In short, the secondary sensor allows you to capture scenes that you would otherwise have to resort to panoramas for. Being so wide, the sensor doesn't deliver perfect stills, as there is noticeable fisheye-like distortion towards the edges, but not so much as to make us hate the mode. But we would be going too far if we made it out to be a legitimate selling point. In any case, if you consider yourself a photography buff, you might want to consider the LG Cam Plus accessory, which is a bulky but mostly comfortable physical attachment that fits into the modular bottom of the phone. It carries its own 1200 mAh cell and offers physical controls and jog dials, making the process of taking a photo or video a bit easier. On the software side, the camera interface of the G5 differs slightly from what we were offered with the G4 and the V10. For one, icons have been changed so that all switches and such are now only outlines, giving the impression of simplicity. Don't judge this particular book by its covers, however, for the G5 is a very competent camera phone with a comprehensive manual mode for when you want to get pissy about camera variables. Onto image quality, it's as if we're reviewing the G4, which is normal given the identical sensor. In short, this translates into excellent daytime and outdoor results with leading color fidelity and none of the overly zealous sharpening that Samsung is known for. We've got very well defined details, though the softness can be problematic in some scenarios where foliage is thick. Twigs and leaves, for example, become almost indistinguishable on tree crowns. After this commendable showing, we were let down by the G5's take on indoor scenes where light isn't as abundant. The sensor has trouble setting the proper white balance, resulting in shots that are either too warm or have artificial color casts, and the overbearing noise reduction, while resulting in very pleasant grain, does also mean that fine details are dirty and on the verge of washy. Despite this, it's still a very competent shooter indoors, just not as consistent as we would like. Finally, nighttime shots are just splendid for a smartphone camera and will offer a challenge to any rival device, including the Samsung Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge. The camera's optical stabilization allows it to go for long shutters, meaning more light is allowed to enter the sensor. So much so, in fact, that at night you sometimes get stills that are even brighter than in reality. Truth be told, we're no fans of this effect, but it's sure to impress the average person and is overall preferable to the reverse. Finally, the G5 delivers in video. There's support for up to 4K UHD video capture, along with slow motion video and time-lapse. If you were expecting the manual video mode from the V10, however, it's not included. In terms of quality, we're very pleased. Color reproduction is on point and footage is as smooth as you would expect. Noise occasionally does get problematic and it's unclear what's causing the seemingly random spikes, so we're guessing it's software related. It's worth pointing out that you can switch between the narrow and wide camera sensors as you're recording video, but the transition is accompanied by a noticeable skip in footage that is just unpleasant. Moving to audio, the loudspeaker on the bottom is pretty powerful. Overall, it's an improvement over its predecessor, as even a listen in passing is enough to discover that the issue with the boxy sound coming out of the G4 speaker is alleviated. Speaking of this, the LG Hi-Fi Plus module is worth mentioning. Created by Bang & Olufsen, this add-on comes in a black matte and adds character to the G5. It has its own high-quality DAC, which allows the user to enjoy high-resolution audio through its 3.5mm output, provided they actually have such content. The reality, however, is that almost all streaming services right now offer compressed, standard-quality audio that won't benefit from the module's capabilities. When it comes to battery life, LG hasn't had the best track record with its flagship G line, at least not in the post-LG G2 era. The G3 offered middling performance in this regard, and the G4 wasn't much better. On paper, the LG G5 fails to impress with a removable, but only kind of large 2800 mAh juicer. As with most other specs, battery capacity can be misleading, but that's not the case according to our custom battery test. Indeed, the G5 managed to keep up for 5 hours and 51 minutes, which is a small regression from the 6 hours and 6 minutes achieved by its predecessor, which had a larger battery. In our time with the phone, we found that it can handle a day of usage, but expect everyday charging to be a must for a peace of mind. At the end of the review process, we just can't place our finger on what is it that isn't feeling exactly right with the G5. Objectively, yes, it's a competent flagship, and even a decent improvement over its predecessor in some ways, but it feels like it's just way too round in character. There are no sharp edges, nothing that jumps out, no area where the G5 is significantly better than what the competition has to offer. This, of course, should be understood in the context of us just looking at the G5 in vacuum. If you throw in the friends accessories into the equation, it would be hard to argue that LG's latest and greatest lacks charisma. Even then, however, we feel as if it's the accessories as standalone products that deserve the credit and not the other way around, and especially since you'll be able to use them with other devices and not just the G5. To offset the negative vibe of these statements, we'll say that the G5 is likable, just not for everybody. We certainly like the new direction LG is taking with design, both on the hardware and software front, and the module's concept will likely appeal to power users and hopefully grow in the future. As was the case with the G4, the camera is also a leading one, and the secondary wide-angle sensor does add some intrigue, but don't expect to use it daily. Despite all this, we're still drawing the line at a short distance behind competing devices like the Samsung Galaxy S7 and the Apple iPhone 6s. Once again, this was Chris with PhoneArena. Thank you guys for watching.